Hello, hey Boomer listeners. Wherever you are listening from, welcome. My name is Wendy Green, and I am your host for Hey Boomer. You like the hat? Today we are going to be talking about who we want to be. And so I got me to thinking about who we have been. Growing up, our parents, our grandparents, our teachers, they all had expectations for us, like girls should be proper and girls don't become firefighters and boys don't cry, big boys don't cry. So, all those rules and expectations that were put upon us, we modified our behavior to try and meet those expectations. And that's who we were being then. And then as we got older, we all became responsible adults and parents and maybe educators or politicians or business workers. And we had certain roles there as members of organizations or religious organizations or, volunteers, whatever those roles were, also became part of who we were. And all of those experiences together have formed who we have been being. How do you like that for putting words together? But now, in the stage that we are in our lives now, we get to really ask, who do we want to be? Who do I want to be? That is a question that I go through in a lot of depth with people that join my What's Next coaching program. We look at who we were as children, what we loved doing as children before we were trying to meet everybody's expectations, maybe. And so we look at that. We look at some of the roles that we have played in the past, and we try to figure out what roles we still want to play or still want to be, and what roles it's time to let go of. So it's an important question. Who do you want to be? And I appreciate seeing all of you out there. Thank you for the comments on the hat. You'll see why we're wearing this in a moment. And Deb Grove, who is our guest today, has been on this journey of discovering and defining, really more than discovering, but defining who she wants to be at this point in life. And she is determined to live life on her own terms. She's also exploring the legacy that she wants to leave. Another important question that we all are starting to think about and wrestle with maybe, and come to terms with, and really start to implement who we want to be and what we want our legacy to be. So as the saying goes, life is a journey and not the destination. And Deb Grove has been on this journey, and she continues on this journey. And we're going to hear all about that as we explore this with Deb. But before that, let me share a couple of never too old stories for you. And these have a little bit of a twist, kind of like the hat. A little bit different this time. So the first story is about a shipwreck that dated between 350 and 410 BCE, and it was found at the bottom of the Black Sea in 2017. It's the oldest shipwreck ever found, and it was perfectly preserved. Other very old shipwrecks have also been found in the bottom of the Black Sea, and also they have been perfectly preserved. So the curiosity is why? Why are these shipwrecks so well preserved and so old and ancient, and others completely decay? And it's because the Black Sea is a particularly deep, semi-enclosed basin, and it is fed by both freshwater rivers and by the salt water from the ocean. And the salt water remains trapped below the surface, way down deep, which keeps the oxygen from getting to that layer. And it's oxygen that causes the organisms to speed up the decay. So these ships are down there and preserved, but they are also very fragile. So they will not be raised up, because the minute they came out of that area that was keeping them preserved, they would decay even more. So they will remain suspended in time at the bottom of the Black Sea. And that's interesting, right? That's interesting. So the second one is a little bit similar. It's about giving people opportunities to become explorers with something called Global Explorer, Global X with an Explorer. And the idea is that everyone in the world can make a contribution to science. So Doris Jones, who is 90, lives alone with her 2 cats. And she was looking for something to do. So she liked playing Sudoku and she liked playing Mahjong. But now, through Global Explorer, she is an armchair archaeologist. She's actually doing something called space archaeology. That is, she's looking at individual tiles or images taken from satellites, and she studies them in very good detail and looks for potential archaeological sites. And her interest in archaeology and paleontology began in the 50s when she and her husband were digging a garden and discovered a fossil. And Doris said, "I believe the fun is in the hunt." And she is contributing to the hunt for lost civilizations and actually has found a couple of sites that the archaeologists are very excited about. So I found both of these stories so interesting. And, life is about lifelong learning. So let's keep learning and exploring new, meaningful things. Hope you like those stories. And now I'm going to bring Deb on. Hi, Deb.
Hi there, Wendy.
See the hat? Don't you
Yes.
love Deb's hat too? She inspired me. That's why we have the hats on today. So
Yes.
As a young girl, Deb Puretz Grove was determined to become a Renaissance woman. She wanted to travel to exotic destinations, study abroad, speak foreign languages, and come home to an environment that reminded her of her very wonderful times and friends. And she was certain she wanted to be a mom. So fast forward from those dreams of that young girl, Deb has started 2 companies, traveled to probably over 40 countries now, served on the advisory board of the San Francisco Conservatory of Flowers, placed her art in more than 50 public collections, and she's written 30 short stories. She has spoken at the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco, hosted IT panels all over Southeast Asia and Silicon Valley, and she became a mom, and her sons have grown into independent, confident young women. Young men. Her sons have grown into independent, confident young men. Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
In 2019, she evacuated her home in California when a forest fire came too close for comfort. And after that, resolved to find a different home where she was not under the constant stress of fire and smoke. And a business associate said, "Come to Greenville. You'll find people who are just like you." So Deb moved to Greenville about a year ago. And we're glad to have you here.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So I wanted to talk about the hats. No.
I said, well, when I moved, I only brought 3 hats with me. I used to have a lot more, but I didn't wear them very often because I thought I'd have too round of a face and they don't look great. But then I thought today, the Queen of England doesn't look so great. Neither does her successor. But the only one that really looked great in that was Lady Di. And, we can't all be Lady Di, but we can all wear hats.
We can all wear hats. So I wanted to start, Deb, by asking you about the young girl who wanted to be a Renaissance woman. It sounds like you've lived the life of your dreams. So where did all those dreams come from?
Well, I'd love to tell you, but the first thing I want to tell you is that since listening to your podcasts, I have been introduced to more and more interesting people than I thought I would be. So through your podcast, I met people that I really admire here in Greenville. And I am just so in admiration of the lady named Anne, is it Basling, who did all the work with talking to people with dementia.
Basting, yeah, she was amazing.
So I have to say it's been a real treat to get to know you and the people that you've interviewed.
Thank you.
So about me, my dad was based in Europe after World War II as a civilian working for the armed forces. And my mother was German. And when we moved to California with my dad's career, when I was 9, I think I still felt very European. And so I've had that kind of conflict of cultures and where do I belong? And I was fluent enough in German, and it became easy to learn other European languages because of that. So I was always plotting to get back. And when I was 16, my German teacher introduced me to the idea of going to Switzerland for 11 weeks to stay with her sister. And that was just terrific. And I just loved it. I loved it. Yeah. And the woman who was my hostess for most of that time, I stayed friends with her until she died. So that's more than 40 years. Wow. And that was longer than any other person who ever visited her house. And I survived many of her children. And it was wonderful to be a daughter to her when some of her own children had already died. That was a wonderful thing. And then I spent my junior year abroad in Sweden. And I was there the summer before and the summer after. So I got a really big, amazing boost in confidence about how to manage myself there. I walked in and was looking for a secretarial job for the second summer after everybody else had gone home. And it was for an algae import-export company. And the director said to me, well, I'll offer you $400 a month. And I said, I can't take that. I mean, it costs almost that much to take the train and the bus and this and that. Forget it. And he said, okay, I'll pay you more. And then he had to go and give a raise to the lady who I was supposed to help because that's all she was. I mean, these little things like this just really bolstered my confidence and made me feel I can ask for the things that I want, and maybe I'll get them, and maybe I won't. You have to be willing to walk away, but maybe I will.
That's an important lesson. Ask for the things that you want, because I was talking about that to a friend the other day. Like, I used to watch guys in the IT industry go in and ask for all these raises. They'd come out with the raises, and I'd be sitting there going, how'd you do that? So you were in IT. I mean, which is a male-dominated environment, right? I was one of the only women in it, and you were probably also one of the only women in your area. So what was that about? How did you get into that, and how did you survive that?
Well, I went to UCLA and I studied international language. Well, I studied Scandinavian literature. And so when I came out of it, I knew that there wasn't a job at all with that. And I went to Thunderbird, which was the American Graduate School of International Management. And so my goal then was to work in international management. I got a job with Warner Brothers. That was a fantastic experience. And then with my boyfriend, I moved out to Hong Kong. And there, I was a real oddity for being a woman there. Well, an anomaly for being a single woman there because we weren't married. And I just really went out and asked for the world. And there was one time when I first got there and I had a friend named Pippa. And Pippa, who was Australian, I said, oh gosh, Pippa, I'm signed up to do these 3-day seminars all over Asia and I could fail. And she goes, who cares? Nobody back home knows. You fail out here, it's quiet. So what? So I kind of learned this attitude that you can have your tail between your legs and then just keep on going. But the more that I tried, the more some mentors came forward and guided me and helped me to move along. And I had to put up with my favorite one, Brian, always telling me to put on more lipstick And I'd say, Brian, that's not your call. And we're talking about, 1982 or whatever. But he always said, oh, you could be much more attractive if you'd wear eye makeup. And I go, so what? I'm smart and I'm going to do it my way. And so I just really had these wonderful opportunities where I really did give 3-day seminars to generals in Jakarta in 1983. And afterwards, I was talking with the person who organized it. And I said, how do you think I did? And he said, oh, I don't really care how you did. What I cared about was that there were women in the audience and they saw a role model.
Ah, what did you give your seminars on, Deb?
Office automation.
Okay. And so that was your intro into the IT world.
That was my intro because before I left, I worked for a division of TRW. And we were one of the first companies to take word processing and take it internationally outside of Wang, because Wang was really big back then. And so I did not have that background that some of the other women in my training class had, but we had one question on our final that was relevant to, okay, if you had to go out and you were a CSR and somebody said to you, should I lease it or should I buy it?
CSR means?
Customer support representative.
Thank you.
That was about as much as we could hope for in those days if you didn't have a degree in coding. And so, the other 8 of the 9 women said, oh, well, I would tell them to lease. And I go, no. There's too much interest on that. You definitely want to tell them to buy. And here's the finances to prove that. And they all looked at me and it was like, they all knew a lot more about being a customer service rep because they'd all been one at a different company when they were hired. But that was a game changer for me because what it said is I'm bringing something different here. I understand the financial difference between a lease and an outright buy, and that has value. So from that again just bolstered my confidence where I didn't have it at the beginning of the class.
So you kept having you kept having all these great experiences with mentors and seminars and bolstering your confidence, which is awesome. And then you somehow, and I'm not sure of the timeline here, Deb, somehow you got back to California and started your own companies?
Actually, right? While I was in Hong Kong, I was working after I got to Hong Kong, I was no longer a CSR. I went there and followed my boyfriend. And I couldn't get a job because nobody wanted an American woman who was there on her own. And so I started my own company called Office Automation Asia. And I marched right up to the Computer Asia editor and said, you don't have a columnist on Office Automation, I'll be that. So for 4 years, I did that. And one time I was deep in the jungle of Jakarta. I mean, so far away. I thought I was going there for a 10 o'clock appointment and I left at 8:30 and I got there at 12 or 1 or something. And I'm in the middle of it was called Bantam Shoes, which is one of the biggest shoe manufacturers in the world. And I didn't really know what I was walking into. And the person who allowed me to come and see him, the IT director there, he didn't know what he was up for either. But he probably had such few women ask by telex, can I come and interview you? That he said yes. So I go into his office, and in retrospect, I figured this out. It was like walking into the Poisonwood Bible that Amy Tan? It's not Amy Tan. Who is it?
I don't remember who it is.
He writes about the teak walls sweating when they go in there. And this is the kind of an office that I walked into. And the man just really didn't know why I was there. But luckily, he had a Computer Asia magazine sitting on his little table in his desk, and I opened it up to my page, and then I had instant credibility because he could see that I was there to interview him and I was going to refer him in my articles, et cetera, et cetera. So that opened the doors for me. And then afterwards, as office automation became more prevalent, we're talking about between 1981 and 1985, then I was selected to be the guest speaker at the Asian Computer Conference in the Southeast Asian Computer Conference and the Singapore National Computer Conference and the Malaysia National Computer Conference, etc. And that's what really helped to propel me and my image of myself forward.
Wow. I'm reliving some of my experiences in IT, and that was gutsy. That was gutsy to just walk in there and say, "You need me."
It was gutsy, and so one day I was in Hong Kong, and I was going up an elevator, and some man was undressing me with his eyes. You're going up to the 32nd floor. He's got plenty of time, and I looked at him and I winked at him, and he blushed. And after that, I learned that was my secret sauce, right? It was just turning around.
Very good. So it doesn't surprise me then that when we first met, and I want to get to your art, but when we first met, we were at a book club, and I heard you talk about you have this vision for creating intergenerational housing, and this is something that is very important for us as we age, to have all generations around us. And I was like, oh my goodness, I need to speak to this woman. And now, hearing everything that you have done already, I have no doubt in my mind that you could do this. But what are you doing? How is that still a dream? Are you pursuing that?
I am, because I was accepted into a multi-generational housing program up in Portland. And I decided the timing just didn't work for me. But it wasn't because I didn't want to go there. It was because, it had everything to do with timing and selling my house, etc. But I could see the real benefits of it, because I don't have my own grandchildren yet, but I would love to hug children of that age. I would love to be a caretaker for toddlers and then hand them back to their parents. And I could see where if I was in that kind of a development, I could be an after-school grandparent of sorts. And then from the people who were living there that I interviewed while I was being interviewed, they were talking about how the elders had resources in people who could help them to carry the groceries upstairs, or help walk their dog when they didn't feel good, or these were real families that were being developed. And this one in Portland, which is called Bridge Meadows, this one had already existed for 7 or 8 years. So now it's been going for more like a decade. And they have 3 more places because it's so successful. So I bought into the concept, along with all the other things that I was thinking I might do, like intentional housing, where you decide who comes in, because you're looking for a mix. You're looking for a mix of people that will get together for dinner, or for dinner Friday nights, or whatever that might be. But then when I arrived here, for some reason, I found out just how difficult and expensive it was to get childcare. I guess because of the pandemic, this became a bigger issue than even before. And I thought, well, this is the way to do it without everybody running around racing, bringing your children 3 miles that way and continuing on to work and being late and all of this. Well, if you're all in the same housing, in the same home setting, that would be a lot easier.
Yeah. So is there potential? Are you talking to some people about
I'm talking to all kinds of people. And some people talk to me once and never talk to me again, which is when you heard me say, I'm not going to let that stop me. I'm just going to walk around them and go, find somebody else to talk with. But it's a very fuzzy line between being totally persistent and obnoxious and trying to imagine myself in their shoes and not knowing, because they're not going to tell you, hey, my grandmother has COVID, or my daughter, is not doing well in her studies because of COVID. And there are all these things they won't say. And so then I have to kind of guess at them. So right now I'm at the point where I don't make phone calls on Mondays or Fridays, because I figure everybody's already thinking about something else. And on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I try to put my agenda forward. So yes, I am trying to meet as many different people as possible. And because I have a very eclectic background, I once did a public-private partnership with the Department of Energy, where I raised funds from the private sector to get something that I wanted to get onto the Department of Energy website, and it was there for 3 or 4 years. I know how to put these kind of groups together. I did similar work for Pacific Gas and Electric and for the Palo Alto Sustainability Council, or whatever that one was early in the day. And so I know how to put these groups together where you have other people that fill in the gaps in your own experience, right? So I'm not a builder, and I don't know the whole financial dynamics of this, but I know who needs to be in the room.
Yeah.
And so it's this successively moving forward, and I call it nudging my way. Because
and if I just want to say, if any of our listeners know of somebody that might be a good contact for you, or somebody that's even already moving in that direction as well, I would hope that they would help connect you with that. But I want to keep going, because this is part of your legacy thought. And I love what you said in one of your notes to me, because you said, if this doesn't happen, that's not part of my legacy. But we're hoping that it is, because I think it's a cool idea. But the other part of your legacy is your artwork. And it's very interesting how you came about the artwork that you do. So would you talk to us about that a little bit?
Well, so I was working in IT for a good 12 years before I started to work on art that I'm doing, which is one of a few of the examples are behind me. But I was married to a man who was a CEO of a startup semiconductor company. And I'd see the kinds of products that they were developing there, and they were all in their infancy. So we're talking about 1992, 1993. And I looked at some of them and I said, "Can I have some rejects?" And he said, "Oh, yeah." And then after I was working with the rejects for a while, I said, "Can I come in and get some engineering drawings?" And he said, "Oh, yeah." So I went and got those things, and I became a better printmaker as I went along. Originally, I was going to do sculptural work, and then I decided I liked this medium of printmaking. And so learning how to make prints, which essentially, in some ways, you can make them as many as you want. But if you want to keep control over that whole process, then you create limited editions. So you say, "I'm only going to run 8 of these," or "I'm only going to run 20 of these." And I never had an edition that was more than 25. And there are many works that I made that are monotypes. There's just one of them. And so as I was starting to work with these from an artistic perspective, that is, in understanding art history and understanding color and understanding quality and prints and dyes and inks and all of those things, I was also formulating how this could be my metaphor for computing. That these semiconductor plates, which are the essence of computing, right? Semiconductors are what makes computing. These are metaphors for extended storage and for the idea of electronic copies versus originals. The idea of originals almost doesn't exist anymore because everything can be copied so well. And so I developed, I'll call it a language with this. So most of my art is not just the visual. I mean, I hope that the visual is attractive to people, but it's also much, much more about the changes, the evolution in society because of computing. And Thomas Friedman, the person who writes for the New York Times, he published an opinion piece back in October of last year in 2021, and he said that he thought that a lot of the expansion from China into the surrounding areas was particularly focused on Taiwan because they have this very high level of semiconductor manufacturing capacity. So they're very much still in the news. They're not like the hinterland.
Yeah, and they're really interesting because some of them you do just with the color, and then others you've brought in some abstract lines, or you've brought in some print material with it. And so they each tell a story, I think. And and if you want to see some of the work, you can go to Deb's website at Puretz, Puretz, propelled.com. So she has, I guess, most of your works up there. Is that right, Deb?
No, but there are 27 of them, so you get a feel for it.
Okay. All right. And the rest are in galleries. So as part of the publicity for this show, we talked about who you want to be in retirement. And as my opening, I talked about, the roles that we play and the expectations we try and fill. So how are you going about figuring out who you want to be now?
Well, I have a few things that I'd like to get done, and that includes ensuring that my art is preserved. But that doesn't take that many hours of the week. When I say preserved, I mean in museums or in corporate collections. But museums are a little safer than corporate collections because they were in Arthur Anderson, for goodness sakes. And Arthur Anderson, big as it was, doesn't exist anymore. So other than that, if that's 4 or 5 hours a week, I've still got a lot of time left over. And I realize now that I'm very much a Gray Panther in the sense that I used to read about them when I was younger. By that, I mean that there are so many assaults on our civic rights, what I call our rights. And the people who can actually address those are not the young people who are working. Because if, for example, teachers, some of the rights to read books, etc., might be at risk in places. But a teacher between 20 and 45 or 50 might need that income and so can't really take that on as an issue. Because if she fights, she might be terminated right away. Like somebody who wrote a book last week and was terminated in Mississippi. He read a book that, to everybody in his second grade classes. So, I mean, these are the kinds of issues that young people really can't take on. There's that whole side of it. And I think that's our responsibility.
I agree.
The second is that, and you'll respond to this immediately, there's an awful lot of software today, like Google software, which isn't as good as Wang's in word processing. But since people younger than us don't even know how good Wang software was for editing Word documents, they don't even know that they're not supposed to be, that they're not competitive. I mean, I feel that way about the return to the people who like records instead of tapes
CDs
or instead of CDs, right? It's higher quality. If you're not introduced to that by somebody older, you don't even know what you're missing. Same thing could be true of civil liberties. So all of this, we have a role to play as elders. Another part of this, though, is that my mother was very much impacted by World War II. She was German and she lived through it, and she lived through a town that was 80% bombed. So when I used to ask her, well, why didn't you rise up? Why didn't you stop the Nazis? And she would explain the helplessness of what it was like to have men in boots going by, men in boots and rifles going right by your front door. And now I feel the same kind of helplessness, right? Like, why am I not doing more for Ukraine? Well, I'm not there. What do I do other than give money or give time or give, clothing or whatever those things are? What is the world actually doing? So for me, this is something that is the tail ends of both parts of my life. They're the beginning and they're the end of my life. For my children, it's nowhere as near. So
yeah, I think a lot of us in the Hey Boomer community are feeling that, like we were involved in trying to make a difference when we were young. Then we raised our families. And like you said, in corporate, there's a lot we couldn't say, but now we can again. So, and it's hard. It's a crisis to think about what we can and can't do. So with some of your art, I know you've made some contributions to organizations of your art to help fundraise. What else are you doing, or do you want to talk about that?
No, because that's actually evolving. I write a lot of letters to the New York Times, and many of them get published, so I express myself a little bit. But I have a patent. I'm one of the owners of a patent on social media, and I stay off of it. So I stay off of Facebook. I stay off of Instagram. My children kind of said to me, Mom, that's not really someplace you're going to feel very comfortable because people are so rude on that. So I've pulled back from a certain part of contemporary living in order to forge my own path. And I don't mind being out of the limelight. I don't mind not being on, a major website. I was very early. I've been an early adopter since I was 21. And so, yes, I was into early tweeting and early podcasting and early this and early that. And now I'm content to just work through my local community, I guess.
Well, and you're new in this local community. You've been here a year. So how do you acclimate? What do you do to get involved and get to know people?
Well, I joined Upstate International, and last summer I taught an ESL class just to get to know that group of people. And then afterwards, I joined a book club, and I got to know those groups of people. Then I went and joined the senior, what is it called? Leadership class over at Furman. And then I taught a class at Furman. And now I'm in the South Carolina Writers Association, and I have a little critique group, which is excellent. Those guys think entirely differently than I do. And when we critique each other's work, I'm getting their perspective, an older man's perspective, and they're getting my northerner Californian perspective. It's a pretty good trade.
Yeah. Do you feel like your courage or your confidence has changed or evolved as you've become older and elder?
Yes, I do. I think I'm more of myself. And I think I'm much more of the woman that my mother really wanted me to be. When I was 21, I read that book. Oh gosh, I'm embarrassed to tell you, but I don't know. It's all about number one or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I have a friend from 7th grade named Lisa who can bring me down to reality and say, I remember when you told me that you wouldn't go to lunch with somebody unless they could help your career. And we were talking about, within TRW or something, not I wouldn't go to lunch with anybody, but I wouldn't go to lunch with anybody in my work environment unless I thought it was going to be. And so, I was really selfish. And so I think I've grown into somebody that's far more empathetic, far more generous, far more open to having been wrong, having been stupid, having been indifferent. And I think that's what my mother wanted me to be.
So just living life has kind of softened the edges and opened your eyes a little bit, is what you're saying?
Yeah, very much so. My dad moved to Florida a long time ago when I was in my 30s. And I went and visited him and I said, I'm not going to move there. Everybody drives too slowly. And so here I am. And I can't stand the people who come up right against me, and are just tailgaters. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to move for you. You can around me if you want.
Right. So Deb, you have been a businesswoman and now an artist as well, and an activist. And that's a lot of multiple sides of a personality. And I'm wondering, is there one that's dominant, or have you been able to encourage all of those different sides of yourself?
I was not a very good corporate employee. I wasn't quiet enough. I didn't acquiesce enough. I was more creative. I was one of those 3%ers that said, I think I can do better than what you're doing and go out and start something by myself. But one time, about 15 or 18 years ago, I took a personality test for kind that businesses use. I forget what all the acronyms are. But she said, you're in a very special group of people because you test very strongly on both sides. You test at both ends of the spectrum, and there's nothing in the middle. There's just, like most people are in the middle with a little bit of this and a little bit of this, but not you. You're way out here, So I said, oh my gosh, no wonder I don't get along with everybody. And she said, no. But Cisco, the networking company, they always have one one person like you on the team if they can find them, because you're the people that are always looking out for the black swan. You know, what's going on. It's a possibility, but maybe not a large probability, but you're bringing it up in a meeting when everybody's trying to get consensus. And, you know, you have your role in those groups, but not everybody wants them.
Yeah, well, I can definitely see that you have strengths on both ends of the spectrum, and it's inspiring. So, you know, as the Hey Boomer community, I always ask my guests if there's one or two takeaways that you would like to leave to help encourage people, in this case, to be who we want to be or to live their legacy.
Actually, I have thought about that, and I have a few. So the first one is ask for help. I could never have envisioned that in a year I'd have so many good, solid, strong, wonderful, compassionate, empathetic, funny women friends. And I think it comes from asking for help, asking for introductions, asking for, how do I get this done? Do you know anybody that can help me do this? So ask for help. And then number two is to reach out for a big dream. So I loved that little anecdote you said today about the woman who's 90 and she's doing archaeology based on these little tiles. Can I be her? Oh my gosh.
You can do it.
All right. Well, there you are. I'll do that after I have all my art placed. And then the third thing is, if you're living alone because you are not with a partner or because your beloved partner has died, you certainly need to grieve, but this is the time to be you. You're no longer looking out for anybody but yourself. So be your full self. And then living alone gives you time to be yourself. And that's not what many people think of as a positive. They may see people that don't have a beloved life partner as lacking and as not having a full life. But that's been what's happened to me. I was married for 20 years. Since then, I haven't been. And so I've made a really fantastic life for myself, along with these wonderful friends along the way. So the last thing I would say is, when I die, I will have reached all of my goals, probably, other than I could have been more generous. And you know, if you've got a background in business, you're always thinking, I can't give away all my money because who knows, am I going to live to be 75, 85, 95, 105? So you're always in this push and pull, this conflict of how much can I give? But I'm sure that whatever day I die, I'll say, well, I got to do this and I got to do that. And this was really wonderful. And that was fantastic. I could have helped the world a little bit more. And maybe that's the best we can do.
Yeah, and that pretty much sums up who you are. You know, you're always trying to help the world and help yourself. So I think that attitude that you talked about of making the best life you can as a single woman is about attitude as well. So yes. Thank you for what you've shared. Yeah.
Thank you.
Again, if you want to see some of Deb's work or talk to her and contact her, you can go to her website at Puretz, Puretz.com. And I encourage you to go there and see some of the work. It's interesting. It's fun. So let me tell you about who's coming up next week, Deb. This guy is going to blow your socks away. He will come on with, hello, happy, he's like over the very moon happy. And he has amazingly overcome some things. He was first in a serious head-on collision when he was younger. They didn't think he'd walk again. He does, or he did. Then he woke up one morning after a terrible illness and was completely paraplegic paralyzed. And after much therapy, he now is swimming in a pool 2 miles, 6 days a week. And he has this whole website about finding joy and keep smiling. And he does a podcast, and he is like the most positive person I've ever talked to in my life. So, yeah. So hold on to your seats and be ready to talk to him. His name is Barry Short. He calls himself the ambassador of joy. So, yeah, a lot of fun.
Isn't that wonderful?
Isn't that wonderful? If you like what we're doing on Hey Boomer, buy me a cup of coffee. It's a way to support some of the work that we're doing. You can buy 1 cup. You can become a member. So just go to buymeacoffee.com/heyboomer0413 and check out the different options there. And join our Facebook group where we get to talk to lovely people like Deb and share ideas. And although Deb's not on Facebook, but we get to share ideas and support and ask questions and help each other out as we are navigating this next phase of our lives. So just email me if you're interested in that, wendy@heyboomer.biz. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. We had a great audience, lots of hellos and thank yous and lots of good comments, Deb. I'll have to share them with you after the show.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. Thank you so much, Wendy. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And I just want to remind everybody to live with courage, live with relevance, live with passion, and remember that you are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. My name is Wendy Green, and this has been Hey Boomer.